When you read the book of Lamentations, the writer begins by comparing the city of Jerusalem to a widow. And he says, how come? How is it that a city that it was compared with gold, it was full of children and a lot of young people, all of a sudden finds herself suffering, devastated as a widow? Luke tells us that she was a widow. It gives us something about her past, whether recent or the former past. She had experienced sorrow. Sorrow was not foreign to her because she was a widow. Number two, it says that her son had died. Now, as that person was being carried out, the only son of her mother, and she was a widow. The fact that she was a widow, she had experienced sorrow. Now she is reliving with a bitter present that now her sorrow is having to be relived because she is on her way to burying her only son. So sorrow relived. Number three, gives us a hopeless future for this woman because her son was the only hope she had to be able to sustain herself, to be able to have grandchildren, especially boys in those times. We're very appreciated. Why? Because they represented the labor force. They represented the ones who provided for the house, the ones who defended the house. So now, all of a sudden, not only is she a woman with a past full of sorrow because she lost her husband, but now she has a bitter present because she is reliving her sorrowful experience, but she is also confronted with a hopeless future because her only hope, her son, is no longer with her. Now, another season of trial had arrived. Another dark cloud had covered her sky. And all of a sudden, although she had lost her husband, now again she comes face to face with death again. How many of you, how many of us have been through an experience where we say, no, please don't let it be again. This can't be. I can't be going through this once again. No, please don't let it be so. This woman was faced with a situation that perhaps she did not envision. She had lost all hope of making a living. Perhaps she had lost all hope, and now she was about to end up being a homeless person because her only son had passed away. Her lone source of comfort and help all of a sudden had been cut off by death. And she is about to walk outside the city gates to bury her only hope. She had no promise. But what I like about this is that although this woman was in despair and she was at a total loss in her life, all of a sudden, Jesus shows up unannounced. We could be confronted with many circumstances that will drain us from our energy, will drain us from our desire to move forward. We may find ourselves with situations in our own individuality that may challenge us. A business endeavor, going back to school, trying to mend a marriage that perhaps has been recently broken, or perhaps the announcement of an illness or a diagnosis from the doctor. We are faced daily with situations that want to cut us off from our only hope, which is the relationship we have with Christ, the Son of God. Now, I got a lot of friends, and I know a lot of people. And someone said that in the time of trouble, you need to reach out to those whom you know for support. Resilience, which is the ability to overcome difficult situations, is measured by the amount of resources that surround you when you confront a difficult situation. go to, you're going to be alone. You're going to be desperate. You're going to be asking yourself many questions. You're going to have no one to comfort you. But the ability to bounce back from any situation whatsoever has to do with who is around you. Who do you know? And if you and I say, I know Jesus, and I know a whole bunch of crazy people in the church that gather every Sunday morning, then we got game. Then we don't have to face our trials by ourselves. Then we don't have to cry by ourselves because we got people that will cry from with us. Then we don't rejoice by ourselves because we have a crowd. We got people that can rejoice with us. We can relate to other people. Say, I've been through that, but I saw God's hand come through for me. This woman was surrounded by a whole bunch of people. A crowd followed her. A large crowd of the town. These were not people from other towns. These were people that knew this woman. A large crowd from the town. Imagine that. I got a question for you. If something happens to you, does your neighbor know you? How many people from your block and my block will come and say, I know Oscar. I know so-and-so. Let me go help him out. I got to remind us that American society has led us to live in communities, whether they're gated or non-gated, whether you pay a homeowners association or you live in a ranch or in a equestrian district. We live in communities of strangers because we have not learned how to relate with our neighbors. A large crowd followed her from the town. And perhaps, I don't know if it happens here, but I remember when I was growing up in Nicaragua, I remember that whenever a funeral went by, if you were wearing a hat, people took off the hat and bowed their heads as a sign of respect to the person who was in grief or was experiencing sorrow. People didn't blow their horns or didn't try to get in front of the funeral procession. They gave their respects. And perhaps this crowd that was with this woman, as they passed by the streets, the narrow streets of the town, which by the way was a very small town, perhaps they gave their respect to the woman who was in sorrow, acknowledging that there was a dead person to be about to be buried. And all of a sudden, someone shows up unannounced. And instead of bowing down and giving respect to death, he makes the procession to stop. Somebody ought to get excited about that.